Hello and welcome back to Authentically Shauna. I'm your host, Dr. Shauna Burke. Today, I am delighted to have with me Stephen York, who has his BA in music and is currently working on his master's in music and choral conducting. Stephen and I know each other from the performing company we were in called The Young Americans. We did, we'll say, 2.5 tours together. We did a short summer tour and then we toured Europe and we did a Japan tour together, and he is here to do what I'd like to call my niece's rom-com in TV history where they did a musical episode. So welcome to today's musical episode. Thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. This is gonna be super fun.
So, how today's format is going to be is we have 10 English Christmas carols that we'd like to share with you. I'd like to side note and say that we are not music historians. We have done some research, and Stephen has had some wonderful musical history along the way. So, he's going to be sharing some of his musical history knowledge along with the research that we did. We're going to be sharing some history followed by singing a little bit of these carols for you. Some of them you have definitely heard of, and some of them you have probably never heard of. But you're gonna hear hear them now. We are starting out with a carol I can almost guarantee you that you've never heard. It's called the Cherry Tree Carol.
Actually, before we start the first one, I'm gonna go over the summary that you have because it's really wonderful.
Please.
This whole podcast is going to be with some of the earliest known Christmas carols dating back to the 15th century. England, that period was medieval, lots of wars. There was the War of the Roses, which then we moved to the 16th century around 1534, where King Henry was King of England and started the whole Protestant Reformation, closing monasteries, burning abbeys. And then we moved to the 1650s with the Puritan public Christmases band, 1700s elegant Augustan England, and then moving forward to the Victorian period, a high Victorian period, where a lot of the songs that we know were romanticized and rediscovered and became very popular to have lasted to this day. So almost every carol you have loved was either born in turmoil or of the late Middle Ages Reformation or crystallized in the optimistic, sentimental Victorian era that rediscovered and romanticized them. So the first carol on our list, the Cherry Tree Carol, uh, it's known to have originated around 1400 or somewhere between the 1400s and 1450s. This song was from an end play, which was mystery plays, which were all based around religious stories, and they were performed in towns by guilds. Guilds are specific people with crafts. So they would showcase their crafts or skills in these mystery plays, mysteries deriving from the Latin occupation. So mystery not in the sense of
Murder
ooh
mystery.
murder mystery. Yeah, it's basically to show off the crafts of these skilled workers. So for instance, if you were a carpenter, you might build Noah's Ark on a moving wagon or something to demonstrate your carpentry skills. So this song is from one of those plays. During this time was the Hundred Years' War with France. The Wars of the Roses was about to erupt in 1455. So shortly after this this song came to be, it's a very old song. It's about Joseph and Mary. Basically, Mary and Joseph were walking through Galilee. While they were walking, Mary had seen all these apples growing on a tree and these cherries growing on a tree. And so she asked Joseph to pick some cherries for her. And he was like, oh, no, no, no.
He's spicy about it.
He did not want to help. Yes, he basically told Mary to pick them yourself. And then the savior made the tree bow down and the cherries were aplenty and Mary was able to pick the cherries for herself. And then when Joseph saw the tree bow down from above, he regretted the words that he spoke to Mary. I had never heard of this song until Shauna and I started doing a little research. I had my amazing accompanist Asia O from my church accompany on most of these songs. This is the Cherry Tree Carol. Joseph was an old man, and an old man was he. And he courted sweet Mary in the town of Galilee.
Verse 2 is as Mary was a walking in the garden so green, where apples and cherries was plenty to be seen. Verse 3, then up spake sweet Mary, so meek and mild spake she, gather me cherries, Joseph, gather me cherries. 3, verse 4, then up and spake Joseph, these words answered he, gather you cherries for yourself, for you will have none of me. Verse 5, then up spake our Savior, bow down to the ground, bow down, thou lofty cherry tree, that my mother may gather some. Verse 6, then the cherry tree it bended, and the cherry tree it broke, and Joseph regretted the words that he had spoke.
I think this is Joseph being in denial that he was the father of Christ. um, and so in the third verse where Mary says, gather me cherries, Joseph, gather me cherries three, she's asking for cherries for all three of them, for her, Joseph, and for the Christ in the womb. And then he's like, no, 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 no. He is not my son. And then his tune changed when he saw the tree move.
Our second carol is the Boar's Head Carol. During this time period, War of Roses is happening. The Tudor dynasty begins with Henry VII in 1485. And this carol, although like a lot of the carols we're going to present to you, have no known author for both the words and the lyrics. The oldest surviving manuscripts of this carol were from about 1450 to the 1500s. And it was first printed in a book called Christmas Carols. And I'd like to spell Christmas for you because it is not how we currently spell Christmas. So Christmas is spelled Christ, Christ. And then Mass is spelled Masse. And then Carol's has double L's and an ES. So it's spelled Carolles. So if you've ever wondered why English doesn't make any sense, we're
That's
figuring it out.
And I'm noticing that the Christ messe is actually the word for mass, like a Catholic mass. It's the Latin word for mass, so that makes sense that they would spell it that way. The mass for Christ.
A new vocabulary word that I learned from this song as well is that it's in macaronic structure, meaning that it has both English and Latin in it. And that was the style at the time was to have both English and Latin be combined, which makes sense at the time, right? They're probably still combining and looking at how to combine traditions.
And I think a lot of it too is um most of the music at this time was performed in the church. People weren't allowed to read biblical texts unless you were a priest in a church, the Catholic Church. When Henry VIII came along and started the Protestant Reformation, they made it so that uh, the text scripture was being able to be read by the masses of the population, the low people, and a lot of the carols at the time were sung with the Old English with just the general population, and so they would include the Latin text because it was significant. It was from the church, so they would use both English and the Latin because they were able to at the time.
You also know some fun ditties about music during the Tudor period.
Yes. So I love the Tudor period.
Me
I'm
too.
kind of a nerd. But what's really cool is obviously the Tudor era was full of turmoil between the Catholics and the Protestants. Each figurehead at the time would kill hundreds of thousands of people because of their religion, starting with King Henry VIII in the Protestant Reformation, where he wanted to get a divorce from Catherine of Aragon to marry Anne Boleyn, who he later beheaded. But there was a lot of bloodshed with those who refused to accept King Henry VIII as the head of the Church of England because they were a Catholic state for forever and breaking away from Rome. People, believers, Catholics did not want anything to do with that. And so Henry just started killing everybody. Flash forward to when his daughters took reign, first being Queen Mary, also known as Bloody Mary. She was a devout Catholic because her mom was Catherine of Aragon, who was a devout Catholic. And so when she tried to get England to become Catholic again, she went on a rampage and killed all the Protestants who didn't want to come back to Catholicism. And then when Queen Elizabeth I took over after Queen Mary died, she was a Protestant because her mom, Anne Boleyn, was a Protestant. There was obviously bloodshed in that sense, but I don't think she killed as many people as her sister and her father did, though there was still bloodshed. Leading to the music, the Tudor dynasty had William Byrd and Thomas Tallis as their composers. Specifically, Thomas Tallis was the court composer for the Tudors throughout King Henry VIII, Queen Mary, and Queen Elizabeth I. But Thomas Tallis was a devout Catholic. And so they knew he was a devout Catholic, and yet they spared him the blade because he was brilliant at what he did. And he was so loyal to their family that they weren't going to kill him just because of his religious beliefs. They could have, most certainly could have killed him, but he created so much music for them. And probably during King Henry VIII's time and Queen Mary, I'm sure he wrote several Catholic music, like mass music for the Catholic Church. But everything he wrote that was for the Catholic Church, he would have to have done in secret. But some of that stuff has surfaced over the years, and historians have found a lot of Thomas's music from that time period where he would have had to been writing this sacred Catholic music in secret. So also, Queen Elizabeth first actually gave a monopoly on the printing press to Thomas Tallis and William Byrd. They were kind of like a pair, like a duo, or like musical theater duo. They didn't really work in tandem, but they had the printing press because they were the only composers that were allowed to print music in England. They're the only composers allowed to bring music from other countries into England. A lot of the music that was in England was banned if it was not English music. They wanted to sound similar to the other countries' music, like Germany and France and Netherlands, but they didn't really understand it. So a lot of it was like dumbed down and like they sometimes sound like bar songs now because it just is like kind of a joke because they didn't know that type of music wasn't allowed into England. So when Queen Elizabeth gave William Byrd and Thomas Tallis the literally like patent and a monopoly on the printing press for tens of years, they were the only ones allowed to actually print music and print staff music and publish books of music that were sent out to the masses. So it's just kind of cool to know that while they were allowed to do this, were still devout Catholics and didn't conform to the Reformation of King Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth. So probably was really favored by Queen Mary though, because she was Catholic herself.
I want to say one more thing about this carol, which was it is based off of a legend. In this legend, a Oxford scholar who was a student at Queen's College is walking to mass and he slays a boar with Aristotle's work and this leads to an annual procession. This is one of the earliest printed English carols and what it exemplifies is how oral festive traditions were preserved in print during the early Tudor era. So here is our rendition of Boar's Head Carol. We are singing the first verse for you.
The boar's head in hand bear I, bedecked with bays and rosemary, and I pray you, my masters, be merry. Potestis in convivio, caputa pridefero, redens laudes Domino. Do you want me to explain the Latin?
Oh, please.
Yeah. So the first thing we said, or I sang, was estis in convivio, which means as many are at the feast. And then we say caput apri de fero redens laudes domino, which means the boar's head I bring, rendering praises to the Lord. Macronic text. A lot of the songs we sing now, like Angels We Have Heard on High, is macronic text because we sing Angels We Have Heard on High, and then we do the La, which is Latin, Gloria. In Excelsis Deo, it's macronic text. It's Latin and English. Our next song is Coventry Carol, and this comes from around 1534 or between 1534 and 1591. I believe it was during Queen Elizabeth the First time, uh, but the story is actually quite sad. It sounds hauntingly beautiful, but when you actually listen to the words, it is really, really sad. I'm going to go back. 1534, Henry VIII breaks with Rome in 1534. Dissolution of the monasteries just beginning. So Henry VIII destroyed all the monasteries, full plundered all of their riches from the monasteries and the abbeys. If you ever get a chance to go to England, there's a lot of monasteries, abbeys in ruins that are still standing, which are really cool to uh, go visit. Coventry is still a rich Catholic city, which is where this tune originated, and plays were banned in 1579. This song is about the massacre of the innocents. It was a mystery play, so it's a religious play based on biblical text. It was first written down in the only surviving manuscript of the pageant of the Shearmen and Tailors. It was copied and revised by Robert Crewe on March 14th, 1534. It is one of the earliest surviving musical settings, which was added in 1591 by Thomas Maldyke, who was a Coventry musician, and he wrote it for three-part harmony for male voices. Again, at that time, females weren't allowed to sing or play. Romeo and Juliet, for instance, who was also during the Elizabeth time or the Tudor reign. So most music that was sung by male voices. This song uh is all about the murdering of the firstborn son. So the moms, the mothers are singing this carol, basically saying goodbye to their little tiny child. Like just knowing that they are going to lose their son at the mercy of King Herod. King Herod ordered the slaying of any boy under two.
We're going to sing for you the first two verses.
First two verses. Lule, thou little tiny child. Bye bye, Lule, Lule. Oh, sisters too, how may we do for to preserve this day, this poor youngling for whom we do sing? Bye bye, Lule, Lule. Verse 2. Lule, Lule, thou little tiny child. Bye bye, Lule, Lule. Herod the king in his raging charged he hath this day his men of might in his own sight, all young children to slay.
Verse 3 reads, That woe is me, poor child, for thee, and every mom and day, for thy parting neither say nor sing, Bye bye, Lule, Lule.
So sad.
I'm really amazed at how this is an oral tradition. That is such a difficult song, how that carried
Yeah,
on
for so long.
for so
Yeah.
long, being such a difficult carol. Okay, our number 4 is one that I'm pretty sure everyone has heard of, but I think there's some information that you've probably never heard in terms of where this song comes from, because I learned a ton searching the origins of this. Our next song is God Rest Ye Merry, comma, Gentlemen. Tell us about that. I know you've done some research as well.
We all know this as God rest ye merry gentlemen, but it's actually God rest ye merry, comma, gentlemen. So they are wishing merry upon the gentleman, like go out and be merry. So it's not God rest you merry. They're not merry gentlemen. They're not happy gentlemen. They're wishing merry upon the gentleman.
Those commas in 5th grade that we learned are finally they're
That's
finally
so
they're finally
crazy.
paying off. So there again is no single author credited for both the lyrics and the tune, but it's thought to have emerged from London street singing circles around 1450 to 1500s. And this is a time when English carols shifted from the Latin liturgical hymns, which we were talking about earlier, to vernacular, joyful, what they called waits in quotation, like that was the word, sung by night watchmen who were the waits.
Hmm.
And I have this mental picture in my mind, which I've completely made up, but it's like West Side Story. Like there's these like watchmen that are just like in little
Yeah,
gangs singing to combat melancholy. We're going to talk about a word that applies in a few other places as well, but this song was first printed in around 1705, and it was printed on something called a broadside. And broadsides were a single sheet of paper. They were printed only on one side, and they contained a song with words and sometimes a named tunes. What I get from this is that there were everyone knew a bunch of tunes
correct,
and
yeah.
they just made up
Lyrics
lyrics.
to that tune.
And
Similar to our national anthem, it was an English bar song, and we just put words to it.
these were sold really cheaply on the streets from the early 16th century until the 20th century, and peak Christmas Carol production was from 1770 to 1850, and at the time, they cost about a half penny to a penny, so in the 18th and 19th centuries, it was affordable to artisans, servants, and rural laborers. Broadsides served as a two-way purpose. Printers took songs from oral tradition and put them into print, but then country singers then learned to refresh songs and then they became reoralized, which I think is really cool that that's how we have gotten to keep these songs is because they were written on pieces of paper and then they stayed in our zeitgeist.
Yeah.
This song was thought to have been written around the time when Cromwell becomes the ruler of England and kicks out the monarchy, and he banished Christmas. I'm not a historian, so what I read and what my understanding is Christmas was a big celebration, so it was a lot of feasts and festivals, and people were getting out of hand, and so in order to cut people back from getting out of hand, they canceled Christmas.
Yeah.
We are going to sing for you the first verse.
Which you all know. You
Sing
should
along with
know.
us.
Sing along. Here we go. God rest ye merry gentlemen, let nothing you dismay. Remember Christ our Savior was born on Christmas Day to save us all from Satan's power when we were gone astray. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy, comfort and joy. Oh, tidings of comfort and joy. The next song is a While Shepherds Watch Their Flocks by Night.
It's actually a really important carol that none of us know. The reason of its importance, I would say, in the history of carols is because it's the first official Anglican Christmas carol. The lyrics are a paraphrase of Luke 2, verse 8 through 14, and were written by Nahum Tate, who was England's poet laureate. And it first appeared in print in a supplement to the new version of Psalms, which was printed in London in 1700. And it was the only Christmas hymn approved by the Church of England among post Reformation restrictions on non psalmic songs. Interestingly, as this song evolved in the 1800s, it was paired with over 100 tunes, with a special note being in 1823, there were 89 tunes that it was paired with, which, wow,
Yeah,
I can't,
that's a lot.
I can't imagine. And the standard English melody is called Winchester Old from Thomas East. And remember how we talked about broadsides? Well, this is how this song thrived was via broadsides and the weights that we were talking about, the municipal street watchers. So here is our rendition. And by our, I mean, Steven's going to sing this one for us. He's singing verses 4 and 6.
Like Shauna said, there were lots of tunes. Oh, while the tune might be different than what you might know, the words are all the same. The heavenly babe you there shall find to human view displayed, all mainly wrapped in swaddling bands and in a manger laid. All glory be to God on high, and to the earth be peace. Goodwill henceforth from heaven to men begin and never cease.
This next carol, I'm sure most people have heard of as well. Good King Wenceslas.
Wenceslas.
I've been
Yeah,
saying that wrong my whole life. I
it's a fun word.
Wenceslas.
Wenceslas.
Last. That's how I've been saying it
Oh,
my whole
oh,
life. So
Shauna.
now I know. Now I know.
Wenceslas.
Wenceslas.
Yes.
The interesting part for me about this song is that it was originally a spring song. The lyrics were written in 1853 by John Mason Neal. He was an Anglo Catholic hymnologist and warden of Saxville College, which is in East Greenstead, and he published it in the book Carols for Christmastide in 1853 under the title, which was the name of the original tune. Do you want to say it for me?
Tempest adis floridu.
Thank you. Which translates to Spring has unwrapped her flowers. So this melody is anonymous, but the original Latin text celebrates the spring and Virgin Mary. The lyrics are a Victorian moral tale put onto the history of a 10th century Bohemian saint. And this saint is Saint Wenceslas, who was the Duke of Bohemia, who was born in 907 and died in 935. He was murdered by his brother Bolslav, and he was quickly venerated as a martyr. And the legend of his charity wasn't based on the historical Duke, but was sort of imprinted on him at a later time. So Neil, who wrote the lyrics for this, wanted a carol that would teach Victorian children the duty of almsgiving to the poor. He wanted a song for Saint Stephen's Day. You're a
Yeah,
saint, and
thanks.
which December 26th, and December 26th became St. Stephen's Day about the 5th century, and it was to commemorate the first martyr in medieval. The time period for that is around 800 to 1500, and in Catholic Europe, it stayed a major religious feast. But in England and Ireland, it gradually morphed into what we now know is Boxing
Boxing Day.
Day.
Isn't that wild?
It is.
Who knew?
I didn't, but
I
now I
didn't.
do. This song was first performed by Neil's choir at Saxville College, and by the 1860s, it was in most English hymnals and carol books.
Yeah, the music we printed out, it actually says the tune is
Glory to
Floridum. We
We
will
shall,
sing verse 1 and 5 for you.
because verse 5 is the morality portion of
Here we go.
good
Good King Wenceslas looked out on
on the
the feast of Stephen, when the snow laid round about, deep and crisp and even. Brightly shone the moon that night, though the frost was cruel, when a poor man came in sight, gathering winter fuel. In his master's steps he trod, where the snow lay dinted. Heat was in the very sod which the saint had printed. Therefore, Christian men, be sure, wealth or rank possessing, ye who now will bless the poor, shall yourselves find blessing. The next song we have is Here We Come A-Wassailing, which is one of my favorites, actually. I love this song. Wassailing is just a fancy schmancy word for caroling. In fact, that's what we usually say now, here we come a caroling. But wassailing was people would go door to door, uh, wassailing to try to get food or um, goods, warmth. They would provide song in doing so. This was composed around during this time. What was happening in England was the Victorian industrial boom. Railways were spreading fast. The 1848 revolutions across Europe scared the ruling class. This first appeared in two near identical broadsides printed in Birmingham under the title Here We Come, A-Wassailing. Its earliest known manuscript is around the feast was a fragment version collected in southwest England. This tune is a lilt, so it's in 6/8 time, which is very common for England, Ireland, especially that lilt, that like Irish jig feel. So it's in 6/8, da 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 da. It has that little lilt going on. I think that's why I love it so much because I love Irish music and lilt music. And it was printed in Joshua Sylvester's Christmas Carols and Songs in 1868. But oral versions were being sung at least 2 decades earlier. We're going to talk about the relationship to older wassails. It is not a medieval survival. It is a Victorian folk carol that grafts the old custom of going door to door with wassail bowl onto the new fashion for Christmas caroling. The older orchard wassail songs, Apple Tree Wassail, and even older, the Gower Wassail, are separate traditions. No individual writer has ever been identified for this song. The text was compiled by a broadside hack in the East, and so we don't know who wrote it. We just say it's traditional English. But it was taken up by middle class carol collectors in the 1860s and 70s, and then it was popularized in America by the 20th century folk revival, specifically Burl Ives, who was great. We're going to sing verses 1 and 2. Here we come a wassailing among the leaves so green. Here we come a wandering so fair to be seen. Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail too. And God bless you and send you a happy new year. And God send you a happy new year. We are not daily beggars that beg from door to door, but we are neighbors' children whom you have seen before. Love and joy come to you, and to you your wassail too. And God bless you and send you a happy new year. And God send you a happy new year.
Everyone loves a good story written about weather, and here
Yes,
it is.
and here it is.
So,
Hilarious.
in the Bleak Midwinter was originally composed as a poem. It was written in 1872, which was at the height of Victorian prosperity, by a woman named Christina Georgina Rossetti, and she wrote it as a poem and actually never heard it sung. The opening line, "In the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan," was written during one of the coldest English winters on record, which was from 1870 to 1871. And the poem was printed actually in America by Scribner's Monthly under the title A Christmas Carol. In 1906, Gustav Holst sent it to the tune, which is called Cranham, which is named after a Cotswold village near his home, for the English hymnal, which was published in 1906. We are going to sing for you the first and the fourth verses.
In the bleak midwinter, frosty wind made moan. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Snow had fallen, snow on snow, snow on snow. In the bleak midwinter, long, long ago.
What can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet what can I give him Give my heart.
Yeah, good. The Holly and the Ivy is up next.
Did you know this one?
Yeah.
I was at Knott's because, I have passes with my mom and we go and wander around at Christmas time and
Uh-huh.
they play music, and I heard this playing.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
never picked it out.
Had
I
you not done
had I
this?
not done
Oh,
this.
that's
So
so
this is
fun.
so fun that I now know this
Yeah,
song.
I love the song. Its earliest known composition was 1860 to 1868. It was a broadside pamphlet as well. They were still being pumped out in the Victorian era, so this was one of the songs that was highly spread among the English population. Its earliest surviving text was from 1710, and it was passed down from oral tradition in the West Midlands. It was first printed broadside in 1820 to 1830 from the Brigham and the London printers, issued versions under titles like The Holly and the Ivy or The Favorable and Virtuous Properties of Both Sexes. What? Oh, the 1861 Joshua Sylvester was the earliest printed tune. It came from a garland of Christmas carols with the lilting 3/4 melody that we sing today. It was written in that piece, so I think they just took it out and made it its own little thing. It is not a medieval tune, but it is a late 18th century, early 19th century folk tune that also appears with secular songs such as The Moon Shines Bright and The Staffordshire Maid. There's a shorter religious version, the one that we sing, that interplays holly as a Christ symbol and ivy as Mary. We are going to sing verses 1 and 3.
This one surprises me that it's a folk song because it's so hard. I don't know how these passed in oral tradition.
Yeah,
This is a pretty challenging song.
I think for us it is, but these are very, very popular in England, especially the Coventry Carol. Like they all know that in England.
This is so hard musically. I
Yeah,
think this is so hard
yeah,
musically.
it is challenging, especially the words because it doesn't flow how the way you think.
Not
The holly and the ivy, when they are both full grown, of all the trees that are in the wood, the holly bears the crown. For the rising of the sun and the running of the deer, the playing of the merry organ, sweet singing in the choir. The holly bears a berry as red as any blood, and Mary bore sweet Jesus Christ to do poor sinners good. For the rising of the sun and the running of the deer, the playing of the merry organ, sweet singing in the choir. Oh, the best for
I know
last.
we did
I
save the best
love
for
this
last.
song.
I I didn't know the song before we did this.
Oh, this is one of my favorites.
Oh, how do you know this song?
Uh, I've sung it.
Okay.
It's because it's a Ray Vaughan Williams piece. So he was the one that made this popular. I love Ray Vaughan Williams.
Tell
So
us more about him because I don't know enough
Ray
about
Vaughan
him.
Williams is a late 19th century, early 20th century composer from England, same time as Benjamin Britten. He was probably one of the greatest composers from England, I think personally, since the early, Thomas Tallis, Tudor period. I think Rafe Williams, Rafe, not Ralph. That's weird. I know I got yelled at the first time I said his name wrong, but Rafe Williams, Benjamin Britten, and Percy Granger, they're all from that same time period, late Romantic, early 20th century. One of his most famous pieces is Dona Nobis Pacem, which was a propaganda piece used to help entice the English to go to war, World War II, to fight the Germans. Beautiful piece. It starts with the soprano singing Dona Nobis Pacem, which is grant us peace. And it's very unsettling because it's a plea for peace. And then you hear the choir come in and you hear the orchestration and it sounds like bombs going off. It's very bombastic and very war uh, thematic throughout the whole thing. It's absolutely stunning piece. And then in the middle of it, which is like the heartstring of the piece, is called Reconciliation. Although the text he used was uh, Walt Whitman's poetry, who's American, wasn't he? Well, yeah. And the centerpiece of the whole piece is a piece called Reconciliation, where the soldier kills his opponent and then he attends the funeral and sees this man laying in his coffin and he's like, him and I are the same. Like I just killed this man and he has a family and he probably meant well. And and he takes a moment and he sees this man and then he goes over and he kisses him in the coffin. It was commissioned by the English government. It still holds. It can mean about any war. The devastation and the war coming in and disrupting the ordinary lives of everyday people. And at the end, the war is over. It's very joyous sounding. But then at the very end, the soprano comes back in with her Dona Nobis Pacem plea, and it's very unsettling. It sounds joyous at the end, and then she comes in, you're like, "Oh, wait, has peace even been
Right.
found?" It's amazing. If I know that was off topic, but if
No,
Dona Nobis
I
Pacem, Ray Vaughan Williams, like, absolutely stunning piece. Stunning. So, yeah. So
this
this
is
guy
this is Sussex Carol, which was again one of these pieces that is traditional, meaning there are no known authors for both lyrics and tune. It was first collected in the 1860s. And the interesting part about this is it was very regional. So this song was only known in Sussex until it was published and written down in
correct.
1904.
That was not that long ago.
Not at all. And the words and tune are not medieval. When historians have looked at it, the text shows 17th and 18th century language, and the tune is a typical English folk melody of the late Georgian, which the Georgian period was 1714 to 1830, slash early Victorian, which was 1837 to 1901. We get to have a little Sussex in our lives. What I read it was that there were people who would go to villages and find people in the towns who would know these songs,
Yes,
and they would have them sing it, and then they would make a written version of it so that
correct.
they could be passed
And
along.
specifically with this one, they went to an old woman named Mrs. Verrill by
Mhm.
a Reverend John Broadwood, who and his niece Lucy Broadwood, and they were pioneering folk song collectors, similar to Bela Bartok, who would go into Hungarian towns and collect these folk songs, these oral traditions by these people that no one had written down. And Bela Bartok would go in, he would write collections of these things. Now we know all the Hungarian folk songs because Bela Bartok, which probably would have been forgotten. Ray Vaughan Williams actually was the first one who published this and made it famous. It was in another piece that he had written. There was just a snippet. He used a Sussex Carol in a collection of folk Christmas Carol melody or like an arrangement. And then he was like, "Oh no, I want to publish this full song." We're going to sing verses 1 and 4. Sussex Carol. On Christmas night, all creation sing to hear the news the angels bring. On Christmas night, all creation sing to hear the news the angels bring. News of great joy, news of great mirth, news of our merciful King's birth. Out of darkness we have light, which made the angels sing this night. All out of darkness we have light, which made the angels sing this night. Glory to God and peace to men, now and forevermore. Amen.
We did it.
We did it!
Is there anything you'd like to say to conclude us out?
No, this was just really fun. I love Christmas music growing up. That's all I listened to with my grandma. So it was kind of nice to just do something fun, like very nostalgic for me.
Thanks so much for
Yeah.
joining us on our Christmas Carol adventure.
So fun.
We are titling this episode The Carol Chronicles, A History of English Christmas Song. And this has been such a fun experience.
Yeah, so
Thank you
fun.
so much. This is the first time I've had someone co produce, co direct, co create this
So
with me. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you in 2026.